let us switch gears now and move on to the Board of Finance. It is 5:15, so I'll convene the Board of Finance for the city of Burlington. It's also still March 24th, 2025. Last I checked, it is 5:15. And our first item on our agenda is the motion on the agenda.
To adopt the agenda.
Moved by Councilor Chavez. Is there a second? Councilor Carpenter, thank you. Any further discussion on our motion to approve the agenda before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We are on now to public forum for the Board of Finance. And again, our practice is to first go to folks in the room and then online. Is there anyone from the public who would like to address the Board of Finance? Seeing none, we will turn online. Is there anyone online? Former Councilor Sharon Busher is online. Good evening. Sharon, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I have two comments. One has to do with the Rock Point Bridge. And my question is, I read through the information and I think I understand it, but I hope that the clarity comes forward when you vote on this. My understanding is that bridge was useful at a time. It's now in disrepair, and we had an obligation to repair it or restore it. And I understand, and in the information that was provided to the Board of Finance was a statement from the capital person, I can't remember, Ashley, excuse me, who said that the reason that the $200,000 fund was coming from this account was because the bridge would not be accessible to the public. So I think I understand that it once served a public purpose, maybe now is not going to, but we still have the obligation to restore it. That's what I took away from it, but I wasn't quite sure. And the reason I care is because it's a fair amount of money that we are committing to this. And I want to understand that reinvestment in that bridge. So that's my question. And I know that, as I said, I hope that information will be clear when you take this up. The second thing is, when you present things to the public, they read them at face value, don't always have the backstory. And so the comments may be germane or not. So this is one of those comments. Regarding the public safety committee, selection committee that was looking at where the police and fire joint safety building could be, I just found it odd that there was no representation from police or fire. There was someone from Parks and Rec, and it wasn't obviously all departments, but and so that's just an observation. And one of the things in that packet also was the amount of money it would take to bring the police station up, the current police station up to, I don't know if it would be a standard we wanted, but it's like $15 million. But the fire station is a historic structure and it would take $4 million. And so to me, I was certainly hoping that as you move forward with this, which I think everybody's excited about, that some thought goes into putting that investment in that fire station and attaching a new building. So utilizing the old and the new at that very prime place where they can watch the library and the old Y building, when that becomes housing, and they can look at the downtown. And I think as a gateway, it would be wonderful to have on the side, safety is our business. Public safety is our business. I just think that there's an opportunity here. And I'm hoping that through all this process, that idea is not forgotten. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. Anyone else online like to address the Board of Finance? You can raise your hand if so online. Seeing none, I will close public forum and move on to our next agenda item, which is our consent agenda. Is there a motion on our consent Moved by Counselor Carpenter. Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor Travers. Thank you. Any additional discussion before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Moving right along to our deliberative agenda, we'll first start with item 4.1, which is a paving contract with Department of Public Works. Will come on up. It's the authorization to award for our paving for the upcoming year. Welcome team. We might start with introductions. Everyone has been here, I've been here, so.
Yeah, Corey Mem, Senior Public Works Engineer, assisting in oversight of the broader paving program.
I'm Brad Keller, Public Works Engineer, and Public Supervisor.
I'm Caleb Manna, Associate Public Works Engineer for the City of Burlington, and I will be managing the contract for the CY25 paving program.
So starting there, you want to give us an overview and then we'll see where there's any questions or discussion from the board.
So we're looking for authorization to award the city's calendar year 2025 paving construction contract to SD Ireland. In the total amount of $1 million, $589,754.60. The paving contract this year will consist of mill and fill paving Archibald Street from Walnut to Willard, Walnut Street, Archibald to Spring, Pearl Street, Battery to South Winooski, College Street, Hungerford Terrace to South Williams, and Cliff Street, South Willard to South Prospect. We also have some traffic calming, pedestrian improvements bundled with this program. Archibald Street and Ethan Allen Parkway, as well as asphalt patches on Battery, Loomis, Pine Street, South Union Street, Arlington, and Ethan Allen Parkway. The project was generated and bid prior to the award of the recent GO bond in early March. The scope was developed based on known funding at the time. So we've got about just over 1 mile of paving planned this year. But we plan moving forward to develop a larger coordinated paving program to begin utilizing the bond funding and to better keep up with the expected life cycles of the city streets.
So the rest of the team want to add anything before we open up for questions?
Just one thing I wanted to add was overall, we were very pleased with the pricing. We found it to be very consistent with prior years. We did not notice a factor of inflation too. We did receive 2 bids, one from SD Ireland and one from ECI. And so, yeah, ultimately we were happy with it.
Questions or comments from the board? That's okay.
Thanks. So is this gonna be the full amount of paving we do, or is there gonna be a second round from another funding source, another team, the DPW team? Just trying to make sure I'm clear on how many miles out of the, I think it's 4.1 as the minimum goal we're gonna actually get done.
Sure. And the contract and the memo you have in front of you indicates 1.19 miles of paving, I believe. So that is just particular to this contract. We were able to utilize some additional funds from CY24, so carrying last year, and we're able to do some paving on the Belmont with that remaining funds. And additionally, the greater paving work in the city is supplemented by our other capital projects, things like the Parkway, Main Street, things like that.
Ultimately, what we're looking to do is we're going to be, obviously, now that we know we have additional funding, we're trying to really coordinate the effort amongst the other numerous projects that we have going on right now to kind of maximize both the water bond passing and their planned infrastructure installations to come up with a really good game plan of how to maximize the resurfacing of the roadways with this funding, increase our mileage, but also not get in our own way with other departments that are needing to do work in the right of way. So that's gonna take a little time now that we know we have the money to really truly get that lined up and get that game plan for the next 3 to 5 of really how we're gonna strategically spend and use that to increase our mileage annually. So this year, right now, this is what we have. We may have some additional patching. Next year's where we're gonna really go hard.
That's also supplemented by some of our in-house paving too. Some of our street maintenance work, smaller scale patches, with more robust pothole filling.
Councilor Kane, any other further questions or comments? Councilor Barley?
Thank you for this. I have questions about asphalt in general. I know there's been huge inflation in asphalt in the last couple of years. You mentioned that you didn't see that this year. Have you seen it come back at all, or is
Unfortunately not. The prices in the construction industry generally tend to not go back down
Right.
to previous rates. So yeah, there were definitely, 2020 and onward, some increased costs there. They seemingly have started to flatten out a little bit, which is something we were also very curious about.
And then in terms of patching strategy, I know from previous years we've had this conversation. Patching isn't filling potholes, it's actually doing some more significant work. Where you don't take it back down to the substrate of the road, but you just sort of grind off the surface and resurface it. And I understand that, but like, we have a lot of roads that are in sort of tough shape right now, and I know even if you prioritize that for the extra, if there's a mile or whatever it is this year that we can do with the Go Bond funding, it doesn't go far enough. So is there any effort on the part of trying to figure out like new strategies where we can maybe patch shorter segments of roads to get more of the serious problems that we have in a lot of streets taken care of, or is there like?
So we've done some of that. That's where in this contract, we do have that. We also have contingency that obviously, once we get through this full frost, melting, that we'll see really where the road conditions look like. And then we could use some of this additional contingency that we have to potentially increase the amount of more robust patching that does occur underneath this contract. So that's one thing we've done in the past with our paving contract is we leave ourselves a little bit so that we can add to that list. So that will be part of it. But then the general broader plan for doing patching kind of depends on, what streets we are paving and how much we can put towards that effort, but then does take away from the mileage of full pavement that we are able to do. So it's a balancing act
Right.
there too.
And is that those decisions are made based on the conditions and the emergent needs? Is there a place, is all of that published on the DPW website? I know that we get a lot of questions as councilors, even daily. Sarah and I got them today about Cumberland. And so just to be able to have that information available so that we can direct constituents to it or look at it ourselves and respond to constituents, that'd be super helpful.
Yeah, the public information that was presented with the Go Bond on the website that has the kind of PCI acceptable, non-acceptable street evaluation is kind of the best tool that we have that can kind of identify that information. Really, when you start talking about potholes and you get into more of the seek and fix aspect of things of streets, segments in front of specific house numbers, that we don't have a way of really presenting that publicly right now. It's in the system, and we have Excel spreadsheets that we kind of track individually when we go out that we have in our department, our group, but it's not something that's just a GIS system right now.
I do wanted to underscore this pretty cool map, just to use layperson's terms. This map that we developed for the Go Bond outreach effort is really a new and very user-friendly piece for the public to use, just for that plus other capital needs in particular. And it is something we intend to keep adding to, so it will be a dynamic. It lives beyond the Go Bond essentially. It is something that we're going to continue to invest in and really use the smart mapping brains within city government to be making sure that's an accessible tool for community members to keep coming back to.
Is it right on the front page of your website or PW?
It's
Just below the front page. I think there's like a visual icon and a link right below it.
I think it's in two places now, so ATV Drives was the elections page, I think it's still there, but then we also just moved it under CT, under the budget side of things, it's capital plan that has its own, spot there, so two places I think right now.
We'll keep thinking about additional ways for that to be easier to
Yes.
find as we.
It also is, I think there is a link to it through DPW's page as well on the city website, underneath the construction portal, like we have our construction activities, we have links to Great Street, Main Street, Champlain Parkway. This, there's a link to this as well on the DPW's portion of the city website.
Councilor Travers?
regret not getting these questions to you beforehand, and if you don't have the answers, that's fine, but I'm curious. You know, as we look to sort of the length in miles here, are you able to provide any sense as to how long the paving actually closes the street for? Like if we're looking at Pearl or we're looking at College Street, like how long could we anticipate the street closure being?
It's hard to say exactly. The largest impacts are when we mill and scrape off the asphalt and then actually pave and put down the new asphalt. The rest of the work, there's a lot of sidewalk ramp upgrades in this contract. So that far less intrusive off the side of the road. About a month, I'd say on average.
It will know more when we have our pre-construction meeting with the contractor, once we have approval to go over the contract. That will give us a schedule. We'll look at what their planned approach is going to be to these roads. And obviously, as this contractor is also doing Main Street, they're going to have a lot of coordination with amongst the different major work activities happening in downtown Florida. So Pearl Street being the main street that we're really looking at how that being coordinated amongst the other work.
And it's usually those 4 very impactful days when we'd have a detour, road closure, something like that. The remainder of the time, more or less people can get by 2-lane traffic, so much less.
Okay. All right. I am sure that you will be thinking about this in the context of the bigger picture with the contractor. Of course, you know, we're hearing a lot of concerns, as I'm sure you are too, about the current flow of traffic in the downtown corridor as it is. You know, I'm thinking right now about College Street, for example, that being the main way that folks going north to south right now are able to access the south end. If the intersection of North and of Main and South Winooski is still closed, then if College is closed there, then you're losing the opportunity to go east up the hill to Willard, which is currently the way south unless you want to cross Church Street. And of course, you know, Pearl Street, I think, has become a main way that folks are getting perhaps over to Battery or otherwise to avoid the traffic right now at Main and South Winooski. So just putting a pin in this one, I suppose, which is just a strong desire to, given all the other construction that's going on right now, making sure that we're coordinating any closures and updating traffic flows as necessary to accommodate, even if just for those 4 days or so.
And on that street as well, we would be updating currently Main Street has the map of the detouring and work zones that they have posted online, which we're also going to be updating with Champlain Parkway's impacts as well as this Pearl Street work as well. So those work zones and impacts to the traffic flow or restrictions will be updated weekly, if not when work zones change.
I'm sorry, can I ask one other follow-up question, which is to the extent, you know, when we get to the point when sort of we're reintegrating the downtown street grid, right, where I understand Pine will be coming up to Pearl, for example, right? Are we doubling up work in any capacity here, right? Like, are we gonna have to tear up that intersection of Pearl again once Pine intersects with it, such that we should be delaying this work in any capacity?
No, that is something we look at too. We definitely don't want to do any extra work or any more than we need to. So no, there'll be no impacts from the 2 projects.
Thanks.
Any further questions or comments from the board? Not, is there a motion? And I would give you a solid by referencing to the clerk if you would like to take that out of your motion. Counselor Barlow.
I'd like to make a motion as,
Thank you. There are actually 2 motions, just to clarify. Okay, both motions, okay, thank you. Is there, thank you, Counselor. Is there a second? Seconded by Counselor Travers. Are there any further comments or questions before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, team. Appreciate it. Moving on to our item 4.2, which is the allocation of bond proceeds for the public improvements for the Rock Point Bridge. With our clerk treasurer. Okay, welcome.
Thank you. I think we're gonna do a Rock Point Bridge projects party. So we have a couple of items back to back. This first one is more about the funding of this project, so I will kick it off. So DPW came to the capital team in, I want to say January of this year, to relay that the project in order to complete it, it needed additional funding to support the work to do so. I will let DPW cover the project and technical components of that, but I then went back to look at old bonds or old projects, funds that are left over, and identified some in this old bike path project that Parks has been working on. And they no longer need those funds anymore. They have been actively working to close that project out, so to spend them out, I had recommended to the capital committee to move forward with reallocating $200,000 of the bond series 2019A proceeds to support the completion of the Brock Point Bridge project. This is looking to be the last amount that this project will need in order to get it completed, which is really important infrastructure need. And the capital committee reviewed this on March 6th and supported it. We have received a review by our bond counsel, and you'll see an attached resolution that accompanies this request also to officially move those funds over to support this project. That is my, I think, high level financial assessment of this. I'm happy to kind of want to let DPW discuss the technical aspects of the project. We'll continue with financial requests on its own.
Let's round it out a little bit, just so people have context for the bridge itself.
Yeah, I can give a little kind of background and history of why we're sitting here for you all today. So construction on the Rock Point Bridge began in April of 2024. And I'll give the abbreviated version here. Ultimately, what was discovered was there was a difference in our exploratory ledge profile. If you're all familiar with the site, you know this bridge goes over the bike path on Rock Point, and there's a big vertical rock wall on either side. The ledge profile wasn't exactly where it was expected to be. That in turn changed a lot of the slope stability design for the abutments too. So your typical bridge would have earth that kind of slopes down at the bridge approach and ends. This site, it's not entirely possible, given concerns for the bike path and these rock walls too. So that was the major pause and the major hangup in this project, was going back through our consultant, our bridge designer, trying to get some clarification and really trying to get a design that would function and be safe for users of the bike path and for the bridge. So we have a revised design that was provided in part by our consultant and our contractor and another subcontractor. So we collectively feel that the design is adequate and we have a path to the finish line here. But with those changes did come some additional scope of work and some additional materials that need to be added to the project. So hence the additional request for funds.
Just for bow tie.
I'm just serious.
And bow tie, I like a good bow tie. So my 5-year-old really into bow tie. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay,
Can I just address the public comment?
Laura, why don't you come up if you don't mind? Thank you.
So that doesn't go unanswered.
Thank you.
We heard the public comment questioning about the nature of doing this work from the city. The bridge does reside on private property, but the Parks Department has a conservation easement with Rock Point. It's a 3-way agreement to have public access and public use across this bridge to be able to access both sides of Rock Point. With the land, with the Arms Park Conservation plus Rock Point, there's a lot of public access trails through here. In addition, with our bike path easement, our lease that we have an understanding with V-Trans about replacement of the structure at this time. So this is the reason why city funds are going towards this use. It supports the ongoing bike path as well as the trail access system above.
And the new school, there's a new school. School.
That's right, it's Eagle,
Eagle
Academy.
Academy.
Thank you. Thank you. Counselor Carpenter?
I just gotta, living right next door to that, confirm how public it is. It's really very public.
Appreciate that. Thank you for coming and adding that added piece to it. Answer the questions. Any further comments? Seeing none, is there a motion that anyone would like to make? Counselor Carpenter? You could also reference, well, it's up to you. Choose your own adventure on this one.
I'll move the resolution as presented in.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second by Counselor Barlow. Any further discussion before we vote on item 4.2? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Sheen. Appreciate it. Well, thank you for the, and then we're now moving the footnote. Going in order. Yeah. Now to item 4.3, please don't, thank you. Yes. Where are you going? Item 4.3, which is also to the Rock Point Bridge. And this is the authorization to amend the construction contract and proposed budget amendment. Back to you.
So
Anything additional that you want to say on this particular, really sort of present them together.
Yes, yeah. Yes, we can take more questions.
I mean, basically,
Question specific to
the first memo is
The funding and
the
the.
funding, and now it's
okay.
us requesting to amend the contract, to utilize those funds.
So moved.
Wonderful. Is there a second? Noting that there are two motions here, just so we are tracking things to the clerk. Okay, so moved by Counselor Travers, seconded by Counselor Carpenter. Is there any further discussion on this item 4.3? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, team. Now you may do. Except for you. And now we're on to item 4.4, which is a budget authorization for phase 1 of the Public Health and Safety Building project with our clerk treasurer's office. Ashley is here again. Ashley.
Great, thank you, Mayor. All right, so this is an agenda item on a budget amendment to support a contract that is aimed at looking at our options associated with a new public health and safety building that is also connected to the relocation, possible relocation of Central Fire Station as part of the Memorial Block project. We have been through pretty rigorous RFQ process to try to find a design team that would be able to help us navigate site selection, site feasibility, help us really analyze the type of programming that we might need in this space that would support at least police and fire services, but potentially even additional public health service system. And then also get us started on some outreach with our community and even jumping into initial conceptual designs so we can have a sense of what, how big we might need to go and what really might be possible with this potential new space. We submitted an RFQ back in November of 24. We received 7 proposals, which was actually really exciting to review. There was a design team made up of myself from the clerk treasurer's office. We had our central facilities manager in the Parks Department. We had Peter, who's here with us, one of our senior engineers in Public Works. We had Ingrid Jonas, who is the mayor's, oh my gosh, what is her special? Community safety, there you go. And so we felt we were trying to really touch all the bases of all the possible needs here. Understanding we didn't quite have a specific representative police and fire. We had internal meetings where we were trying to discuss what all the needs might be for all these facilities. And so we did feel like we had a lot of bases covered in this initial RFQ review. So we reviewed all 7, we evaluated all of them. We chose 4 of the 7 to bring in an interview and get a better feel for who we felt might be best served in this role to help us out getting what we needed. And we ended up feeling that Dorn Whittier was the design team that best checked all of our boxes. And so this contract, their final proposal was about $151,000. And as such, it falls within the mayoral approval threshold under our new purchasing policy. That said, in order to fund this new project, we needed to secure funding, and there is some remaining funds that were never allocated from the FY24 GO bond draw, which that draw also helped for other projects at the police department. But we do have history of utilizing that bond draw and really the whole $22.8 million general obligation bond draw to support facilities capital projects. I took this to the capital committee to review, to request the support to fund this project with those bond proceeds. I received that support, and we are now here to try to secure the budget for this project. If we are able to finalize the contract and secure a budget, I envision us kicking off with this team in the very near future to start internal stakeholder meetings to go through what all of our needs are for a space like this. And that would include all of our stakeholders in the city at the table, and to kick off a site feasibility so we can really get on the ground and start figuring out which sites really make the most sense for this project. So nothing is being ruled out at this time. All options are on the table. This is truly an opportunity for the city to get a better sense of how this project might look and might actually work, so we can get what we need in terms of our community safety for the city. So back to this request. This request is to gain authorization to create the project budget, of which I've requested $200,000, an additional $50K, knowing that there are so many unknowns with this project, and it's hard to know if we will need some money to support another consultant or other requests that comes through, and I know that we get in this discovery process. The contract itself will be at $151,000, and so that is my request tonight for this one.
Thank you, Ashley. And I will just add that as we continue to sort of in a parallel way, look at our community safety response and continue to get clearer around the public health portion of what Burlington is experiencing as it comes to community safety, this is really important to be able to have that flexibility within this proposal as we imagine into what we really need for a comprehensive response system that looks at what we're doing now, but looks again more how we can be more effective in our response, and being able to have that flexibility is really key as we work with this partner now to think about the feasibility of it, the placement, how we do integration. This is really a moment for us to be strategic in designing a facility that really meets not only today's needs, but as things continue to evolve in the next several years. And I think this is quite an exciting opportunity for us to be bringing this online and working with obviously a very qualified firm in order to help us really expand our capacity and expertise on what we should be thinking about, what other communities have already thought about and done integration, including even my hometown has done this already. So any questions? Councilor Carpenter.
This is sort of bigger picture. You keep referring to this as phase one, and to me, this is a request for a consulting contract to do an assessment to see what we want. And I just think from the public's point of view, calling it phase one presumes we're also going to build a new building combined. And I am reading this, and unless you tell me otherwise, the whole role of this is to figure it out. So I just sort of a caution that it's not really phase one, it's the planning phase of what we're gonna do. Because we don't know what we're gonna do, right? I mean, isn't that the whole point of this? And I think there's this, and this feedback I'm offering from other people. Oh, you're gonna start building the building. I mean, phase one sounds like you're gonna start. So that's just like caution about what you're calling it. And I think some of my councils have also raised some issues about how does this relate to Memorial Auditorium and the work we may or may not get from the developers about the moving of fire station. So if you could speak a little bit to that as well.
Yeah, so I think I've worked really closely with Cara
Yeah.
And, you know, our read of the current pre-development agreement is really, we have to do this, due diligence, essentially, to figure out what we need, so we can then relay that to the development team to really get into those next steps, which I think are what everybody is really most concerned about in this agreement. So I mean, that's really like, this piece of this, you know, is this planning is really critical for us even getting into that stage and telling them this is what we need. So I would say, you know, the city does not have that kind of capacity or maybe even experience with this kind of a project to be able to provide, you know, here is exactly what we need in this space. And I think having a qualified group working with us to be able to navigate that, which it'll involve some really tough conversations with all of the folks who provide these services every day. But I think having that team there helping us navigate that, having those conversations will really refine what we end up putting down as here's what our project is going to look like.
And I will add that, as mayor and seeing this in this first year from where the pre-development was for the Memorial Block, where it really focused on fire needs of the center city and where the Central Fire Station is at in the moment, with being a beautiful building, but a building that's not necessarily able to support the modern day needs for fire services. It is really an important moment for making sure the city is the lead here in designing and stating what we need for our services and not passing that prematurely to developers who will be critical partners for us as we continue to explore what is possible. But the city really needs to be the lead, because this is a public safety building, one for which we hope to have an integrated public health response to it, where we're doing multiple things at once. So again, I hear the feedback and I appreciate feedback, of course, of how we talk about things, but there's always a first step, right, of understanding is this feasible. But more importantly, I hope that the council can see this and the Board of Finance can see this is the city being a lead in a project that is really about a city building for which we need to play that leadership role and really be the defining entity about what's in there, where the scoping, the location, how it impacts call response times, all of those pieces. And that's really what this work is embarking on.
One other comment, and I haven't watched with Dawn Whittier, but I always perceived there was very engineering based, and they're a big company, so I understand that. And so again, there's a lot of engagement and work to be done prior to the bricks and the stakes. And I'm presuming that got discussed in the RFQ.
Yes, it was definitely one of our key characteristics that we were looking for. And one of the things that I remember from their proposal was their community forward approach. And the way that they talked about engaging with our community and getting on the ground and talking with all the stakeholders, both internal and external, it really made me feel like this was the right group to go with in that regards. So yeah, that was definitely a key contributing factor to the decision-making process.
Thank you, Councilman Pemberton. Other questions or comments from the board? Councilor Brown.
And thank you for this, and I am supportive of doing this work. I do have some concerns that I communicated in an email earlier around presuming that this will be a single building, and although I recognize that may be the most effective way to go, the fiscal realities may be such that we need to do significant bonding to build a building like that. Meanwhile, we'll still have the needs to relocate both the police station on Wentworth Avenue and the Central Fire Station. So by moving in this direction, we're sort of assuming that we're going to be able to find whatever bonding authority we need and the debt capacity of the city. We just went through this with the GEO bond for 20 million that we had to sort of really work to get, depend on the appreciation in the grand list. So I just think it's important for us to continue to hold open the options of having two separate facilities, if only to realize both the needs of both the fire and the police department to get new accommodations. And although one centralized facility might be the best solution, a lot of times we can't afford the best solution, and I just don't know if we can or can't, and I understand we need to do some of the work to understand about sites and costs and those things, so I'm supportive of it, but I don't know that I'm entirely ready to just to permanently couple those two projects together. Until we understand what the costs are and, so I'd like us to hold open the possibility that these may be two separate projects. And so that's just maybe a comment. And then the other thing is, and I think Ben raised this as well, is that the contracts for 151,000 is the bid. That's basically a consultancy contract. I mean, in construction contracts, I know we opt in, we'll have a 15% contingency, but there's over a 30% contingency in this for work that we may have, and we very well may have it. But I'm just wondering if we could approve a smaller contingency and come back to this bond funding source if we needed it, if there was further work to do later. And the reason I would bring that up is only because we have a lot of other capital needs in the city, and it could buy like maybe a item in the fleet needs, or or contribute to that. So yeah, I would be interested in knowing there's an openness to us approving something closer to the ask and the bid price on that.
Yeah, so I think I would be happy to consider. Yes, we can consider that. I think my one caution would be this funding source is secured now, but with the FY26 budget around the corner, I do not see it lasting if it doesn't get secured now. Which is fine, like you said, I definitely am aware of all the capital needs we have in the city and the struggles that we have to fund all of the things. But I think this project, trying to be mindful of the fact that we do have so many unknowns, and knowing we're gonna have to put together a pretty big, sizable capital stack of different funding sources to really make it happen at the end of the day, I think it would be beneficial to know that we have a little bit of a gap to do some things. If there's like if there are tests that we need to do, or some kind of other work that is really important in terms of our site feasibility or selection in particular, that is the piece that I think I'm more wary of. I think the programming piece is actually going to be fairly straightforward, but it's the unknowns with the site that I think I'm a little bit more cautious about, and why I'm hoping to secure a little bit additional in the budget at this time. So.
Thank you, Ashley. And I would just also add, in those initial internal meetings that Ashley mentioned that we had with members of BFD, members of BPD, to really start just the initial scoping of, if we imagine into a space, best ideal space ever, medium, we sort of bucketed all the different needs. There are overlaps, not a ton, but there are overlaps of needs of what the workforce needs for fire and police. And I would imagine also a public health entity, of course, that we don't formally have now. So they do encourage us to think more expansively of what could be as we think about efficiencies and think about kind of smart use of public space that could meet similar or very much overlapping needs within police and fire. So that's another thing to be considering. And considering the complexities of all the properties downtown that may or may not be available, I really think a contingency, to Ash's point, contingency plan of how to utilize funds could be very advantageous to the city to make sure that we can put things on the possibility list that may be harder to do if we have such a limited scope of money to be able to use in creative ways. Councilor Carpenter.
In that vein, and I can appreciate the need, is part of me would like to go the other way, as you identify sites, might not be a site for public safety facility, but it might be a site for something, like housing. And so the degree that we can double dip, I don't think the city, well, everybody's got sites in their hands, right? But we really, in constituents will tell us all the time about a site, it's just perfect for something. But it isn't just perfect for something, because it's contaminated, most likely, when we start there. So that was a long-winded way of saying, is I hope, as we look at site selection, we also look a little broadly and put a little asterisk and say, well, that might not be good for public safety, but it's a site we need to spend some additional time or additional money on. And the degree to which you need testing to do that, i.e., because my gut is some of the sites highly likely contaminated, or they be built.
I think that's perfect. It is about 6 o'clock, so I am just inquiring if there's any other burning questions or comments forward, or if we're ready for a motion. Councilor Travers.
I know it's 6 o'clock. I just want to echo what Councilor Barlow said. I am not supportive of signing off on a $200,000 request. I think that for the reasons Councilor Barlow raised here, I think that you know, we just supported for the paving contract there a 12% contingency. And from my perspective, we sign off on that because in a construction contract, there are circumstances outside of our control that may come up, including increased costs of materials, things gone under the road, whatever it may be. In a consultancy contract like this, I think it should be more in our control. I recognize that there may be some unknowns here, but I would hope that these consultants in coming in and interviewing with us would have understood the unknowns that there may be and would have baked that into their bid. You know, in my experience in working with outside consultants, if they know there's $200,000 available, they're going to spend $200,000. And so that's why I have some reservations along those lines. I can understand some smaller contingency, but I think approving up to $200,000 at this point is not something that I support, even though I am fully supportive of the project and understand the need for bringing in a third party for doing the city's portion of this work.
Other comments and or possible motion? Councilor Carpenter.
In that vein is, I mean, we want to get started with the contract and we need $150,000 back. Is it possible for us to approve that or something slightly higher and ask them to I mean, would help to have some clarity about, to give us things like testing or, you know, once they get on board, and I sort of agree with them, contractors or consultants, I'm just going to give them, what I hear you saying is you'd like a little pot of money if they identify something that might take not them, but an additional third party to come in and do something. You want to know perhaps there's a pot of money that an additional third party outside door Whittier might need.
Correct, because their contract is limited to 151.
Yeah.
So there would need to be an amendment anyways to the contract if we wanted to go into that for them. So yeah, the contract maximum limiting amount is the $151,000.
Thank you, because I think it's important clarification here is that the contract authorization in front of you in this motion is only the contracted $151,000 to the contractor, the consultants. The additional almost $50,000 is a contingency amount of money for which the treasurer's office would be authorized, correct me if I'm wrong here, but authorized to tap into for the what if possibilities. Of course, if we end up not needing it, we have an endless list of, and we all know this, of capital needs that we would reallocate, making a budget adjustment as needed within our procurement policy to use those funds in a more diligent way. That is the request in the motion in front of you is approval of the contract with the consulting company of $151,145, and then the contingency separate and in charge of the clerk treasurer's office being in charge of utilization of that. Right? Yes.
Budget authorization.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Just one other, is there any, because that's bond money and I know that gets tricky, is there any reason it needs to be designated now? I mean, I don't know if there's a deadline on that money.
We have, so it's 24 draw, 3 years spend out. So 27 is when it needs to be spent, but regardless of what happens tonight, if the direction is that we reduce the contingency and stick, something smaller, those bond funds will likely go into something else for FY26. So either way, the money will be spent likely within the 3-year spend out. So, yeah, either way.
Eric, do you wanna join us?
I just
Come on
wanted
up to the table here.
Quickly clarify that the item before you is the budget. Or the budget, not the contract.
Thank you very much, Eric, for clarifying that. So it is the budget amendment request in front of us, but with the budget delineated as such, as we stated in the memo. So just clear, is everyone clear what we're actually voting on here? We're trying to really tease out the two concepts within this budget amendment request. Councilor Brown.
In the interest of trying to get unanimity on this, because I'm still not 100% there on 200,000. I'm wondering if we could authorize 170,000. Really, is that 15% or something? So it's close to that. That way we would have additional monies for contingency for additional planning purposes that are yet to be spent, that may come up. And I understand that you test soils and things, you may have additional tests you need. I know they ran into that in high school. But it would also, provide the funding for this, for the contract. That's something the administration is.
Just trying to understand what 15%. I'll know what we're talking about. So another 22,600. Am I doing that correctly? The back petitions and then.
Yes.
Yeah.
If that works for you folks, like that'll work for us too.
Knowing, of course, that if there is, if we find, for all the different scenarios, which we go over again, that we might need to come back for additional requests to really make sure we can stick our landing to something that would be really advantageous for the city. So are you perhaps making?
I am making the motion to reduce the amount in the motion to the contract. 15%.
So
75.
Well, it's.
So if we're doing 15% of the consulting contract, 15% of the value of the consulting contract, I checked my math, but I believe that's, if we're rounding not to the penny, $22,672 for 15%. Mathematician.
Well, if I may just offer another suggestion here. We're calling it a contingency, but it's not really a contingency, right? The contract is the contract, and we're not asking for a contingency on that contract like we would for the paving contract that we did previously. What we're asking for is a separate pool of money to be used on yet to be determined unknowns. And so I think because we don't know what those knowns are, that's really now where my reservation is coming in with respect to what that number would be. I would suggest that we approve the contract and then we can set aside a separate pool of money of $20,000, which takes us up to 171 and change here. We have that on top of the contract cost, but so a flat number of $20,000 on top of the contract cost is a number that I'm comfortable with.
So can the board clarify what the motion is? And I want to clarify in the memo, it does talk about a project contingency, though it's not saying that the original amount was connected to the consultants and always going to the consultants. I think we're getting closer to clarity here, but can someone clarify what the motion on the floor is?
The motion on the floor would be to approve. It would be the motion that's here, except for instead of the 200,000, it would be the contract amount, which I don't have.
171,000.
We call it 172,000. I mean, that's sort of rounding up to the next 1,000 from the contract amount plus 20,000.
So Councilor Barlow has made a motion to approve approve and recommend that to the city council authorize the CAO or her designee to effectuate the necessary budget adjustments and transfer of the fund in the amount of $1,702,000.
$172,000.
From the bond series 2023A in order to establish a project budget for phase 1 of public health and safety building. Is that your motion?
Yes.
Councilor Barlow, is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Travers. Any further discussion on this before we vote? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ashley, very much. And with no other business for the Board of Finance, we will adjourn our meeting at 6:10 p.m. Thank you very much.